Mangrove forests are an important part of the Florida ecosystem. Mangrove forests of the Florida Keys and dry tortugas provide critical nursery and hunting habitats for many marine species. It helps move along carbon as well as export organic materials that help support coral reef as well as seagrass food webs. They are also critical for nesting and foraging habitat for marine water birds. Many of the mangrove habitats in the Keys have been torn apart by the growing cities. The many losses of mangroves has all but stopped thanks to the laws in the Keys protecting wetlands. However, these laws are always in threat of being taken away. Some of the other threats to mangrove forests are invasive species like pythons and contaminant spills. Before cities started being built in the Keys, there were about 95,000 hectares of mangrove forest in the Florida Keys and dry tortugas. These habitats provide homes for many fish-eating birds as well as nesting and stopover homes for resident and migratory passerine bird species. In the Florida Keys, there are 3 types of mangroves: red, black, and white. Buttonwood, which is a Cornucopis erectus, is a mangrove associate, is also common in many mangrove forests in Florida. The 6 different types of forests are overwash, fringe, riverine, basic, Hammond, and scrub forest are a result of climatic conditions, tidal forces, and soil types. Mangrove forests have a very important role in the ecosystem. They sequester nutrients and act as a wastewater filter, which thereby plays a role in water quality, and they can be sources for export of organic material into coastal waters. These wetlands enhance the fish biomass in nearby seagrass beds and corals and other reef-building invertebrates have been found to incorporate mangrove organic material. There are certain attributes that people care about that provide critical ecosystem services to the entire southwest coastal ecosystem. Coastline protection and stabilization is one. In the Florida Keys, property owners benefit from the protection of mangrove forest offered during tropical storms. The forests act as buffers to wind speeds and help reduce storm surges, which in effect tone down the damage to developed properties. Boats are also offered protection through mangrove-lined creeks. Bird habitats are also offered services by mangrove forest. One of the fastest growing pastimes in the United States is bird watching. In some birding literature advertisement by the Monroe County Tourist Development Council to attract bird watchers to the Keys. Even the tourists who find nothing appealing about bird watching have their visits enhanced by seeing such common species as brown pelicans, osprey, eagles, herons, ibises, and spoonbills, which lead to higher visitor attraction. Mangrove-rooted habitats provide nursery habitats for economically valuable juvenile fish and shellfish, which provides foraging for habitat for game species. In 2005, retail sales associated with saltwater recreational fishing in Monroe and Miami-Dade counties totaled $408.7 million and supported more than 7,200 jobs. Wastewater and stormwater filtration are another attribute that people care about. Mangrove forests tend to act as sinks for both nitrogen and phosphorus, taking in these nutrients as water flows through the forest. Wastewater and stormwater are rich in these nutrients, which can be damaging to coral reef and other ecosystems. The presence of mangroves adjacent to developed areas in the Florida Keys would reduce the amount of nutrients reaching the reefs by filtering runoff through the forest.
How can we assess the health of our mangrove forest? How can we determine their response to factors such as sea level rise, climate changes, and land use pressures? Researchers measure 5 attributes to this system. They are mangrove forest spatial extent, prey-based production, wading bird and game fish use, fish nursery capacity, and changes in bird nesting habitats. Between the 1950s to the early 1980s, due to our expansion of land use, mangrove forests have been destroyed, and thus, since the 1990s, they have been protected under our law. It is, however, still important to monitor spatial extent, forest type, and species composition to determine the effects of illegal clearing, tropical storms, invasive species, and climate change. Faunal surveys of indicators have provided vital information regarding the health of our mangrove ecosystems. Animals by instinct respond quicker to environmental disturbances, and thus the survey reveals the effects of the damage before it has completely overtaken the area. For example, the survey reveals how white-crowned pigeons and the number of birds entering and leaving a nesting colony determine the number and spatial extent of pigeons' use of mangroves. And thus, species composition determined the importance of forests in the Keys to migrating species by capturing birds in nests and through visual observations. The primary drivers of change that will affect the Keys mangroves in the coming future is climate change. Yet other factors such as contamination spills, invasive species, and urbanization can result in changes in the forest type, tree species composition, or the loss of mangrove forests entirely. Also, invasive animals, freezes, and hurricanes tend to result in overall loss of mangrove forest spatial extent.
Changes in global climate change have a direct impact in the Florida Keys mangroves. The explanation is simple. Increased sea temperature, something that is constantly happening on the Atlantic Ocean, have been demonstrated to increase the number and intensity of hurricanes since the 1970s. This increase will result in greater frequency and intensity of strikes in the Florida Keys. As was demonstrated from Hurricane Andrew in 1990, intense storms can destroy entire mangrove forests. Although global climate change is the greatest threat when it comes to the existence of mangroves in the Florida Keys, contaminant spills events must be tracked carefully. The 2010 BPO spill is a clear example of the possible effects a contaminant spill happening on the Gulf of Mexico could have on the Florida Keys. If the spill would have been stopped in time, the currents of the Gulf of Mexico carrying that oil could have led thousands of animals' deaths and their habitats destroyed. A drilling accident close to the Florida Keys, as might occur with the advent of oil exploration in Cuban territorial waters by companies of Norway, India, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brazil, Venezuela, Angola, and China, could result in the same.
Mangroves are adapted to thrive in anaerobic soils. These adaptations include a shallow root system and root specialization, which allow portions of the root to take in oxygen and distribute it to the roots in the anaerobic environment. If these roots become coated or clogged, then the oxygen is blocked from the roots and the plants die. However, if the specialized root systems become flooded, the roots cannot respire and the tree would drown. Even if sedimentation rates can keep pace with the rising sea, tropical storms can remove both trees and sediments from wetlands, leaving behind a habitat not fit for mangrove colonization. Mangroves are susceptible to cold climate, which result in defoliation and death. For instance, the December in 1989 freeze was particularly harsh. Overnight temperatures dropped to approximately freezing temperature for 2 consecutive nights along the lower east coast of Florida. This resulted in the defoliation of hundreds of square kilometers of dwarf red mangrove forests along the extreme southeastern coast. Although current and future losses of both mangrove and upland habitat in the Florida Keys are regulated, losses still continue through permitted and illegal clearing of the habitats in urbanized areas. In places like the Everglades, mangroves are expected to remain the same or increase in size with an expansion inland and the accompanied loss shoreward. In the Keys, much of the inland habitats have been destroyed through urbanization.